Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a narrative that's started to catch a little bit more attention lately, or at least I'm seeing it more. But I think you just want to think in this whole world of chain abstraction, right? And I guess like a lot of people draw parallels to how the internet used to work to how it works today, where you're just sort of popping open a browser and you don't care about anything going on under the hood. I think we want an extremely similar experience in the crypto world. So you have ETH, Solana, and Cosmos. You don't have to worry about where all of those things are. You want to interact cross chain. You don't have to worry about navigating to independent pages. It's sort of just this world where you can access all of this stuff, but you really don't have to get super deep in the weeds, sort of like we have it today.
Welcome to Steady Lads. Today I'm interviewing Joe from Picasso. Picasso is a project trying to bring IBC to every chain. IBC is the Cosmos interoperability solution. It allows chains to communicate with each other, similar to how the internet allowed early networks to communicate. Picasso is also building a cross-chain restaking solution, starting by bringing restaking to Solana. This is a really interesting episode if you're wanting to learn more about IBC, cross-chain restaking, Picasso, and a ton more. Let's dive in. All right, well, can you briefly introduce yourself and just like your background in the space?
Yeah, totally. So my name is Joe DeTommasoi. I head strategy at Composable. Crypto background, I got into this stuff a super long time ago. My friends and I were doing profit switching algorithms, mining script-based consensus coins. So it's like Litecoin, Feathercoin, Vertcoin, a ton of stuff that's just gone at this point. My professional background was in finance, so I actually got into crypto like end of 2018, 2019. Some of the larger institutional firms were getting funding. I joined a firm called Falcon X to help them build out their initial OTC trading desk. And then I had hopped from there over to the venture side at CMS Holdings, where I was helping them just kind of research in the DeFi space because it was all super new at that point, and then just sort of leading the investment process from like deal sourcing to actually writing the check. That's how I came in touch with the guys at Composable. We were investors in the seed round over there. So when I left, I was just trying to help out with some BD stuff, introductions where I could. And then I joined the team, let's see, it's been about a year and a half or so. So over here, I help manage BD and partnerships, so like what integrations look like with other teams we're working with, and then a little bit on the marketing front, just how we're kind of putting our message out there. I think aside from that, in the background, I sort of have a say in like the overall architecture and the protocol design and some of the ways that the token works and stuff. So that's kind of the background on me here.
Okay. Can you give like maybe a brief overview of Composable and how Picasso fits into the whole picture?
Yeah. I think the easiest way to do it is I just kind of break it down into two pieces. So the first piece you should think of is just purely infrastructure, and this is Picasso Network. And the main goal there is extending IBC outside of Cosmos. So we've been sort of running this test in production, for lack of a better term, but right now we're hooked up to Kusama and Polkadot and most of the major Cosmos chains, which was the first time IBC was outside of the Cosmos ecosystem. And then soon in the future, we'll be hooking up to Ethereum and Solana as well. From this, I don't know how many listeners or yourself have heard like the restaking that we're doing on Solana. This is a direct, a direct result of us building IBC to Sol. Because of the way that Solana generates state proofs on its chain and how IBC works, we needed an additional validator network to go ahead and help with security on this. And that's sort of how the Solana restaking narrative was sort of born. So that's Picasso, that's one side, infrastructure, IBC, restaking. It should just be infrastructure synonymous over there. The broader vision, I think, with Composable on the whole is then building this application layer on top. So this should be thought of purely from an application perspective, essentially unifying everything that Picasso connects on the infrastructure side. So you should imagine some simplified interface where you could do all types of cross-chain stuff, like the most basic swap, stake, lending, on any chain that we're hooked up to via IBC without having to worry about the whole process of interacting with the DEX and then a bridging platform, then another DEX all yourself. You as the user could just sit in one spot and do all this stuff. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up both sides.
Okay, so Composable and Picasso are two different things, or how are they linked together?
Yeah, well, I think this was sort of birthed from the fact that the project was started as a Polkadot project. So in that ecosystem, you have Kusama and Polkadot. Most of the time, it's like a mirror image. So teams will release their protocol to Kusama. That's sort of like the live testing. And then they would go over to Polkadot with the main application. For us, we sort of took that in a different approach where they're pretty segmented between this infrastructure and app. And that's sort of where the two sides were birthed out of.
Okay, so you said that the goal of Picasso is to bring IBC to all these different ecosystems. So to bring IBC to Ethereum, bring IBC to Solana, Polkadot. What does that like mean in practice? And what sort of what might the end result enable or look like?
Yeah, totally. So for users that don't know, I guess IBC is the native bridge in the Cosmos ecosystem. So everything there is able to be connected with this. To go ahead and get that to work outside of the Cosmos ecosystem, you need something called a light client, which is basically just a boiled down version of information on what's going on in a chain at any given time. For most ecosystems, we had to go ahead and build some version of this ourselves. So that's kind of where projects actually working on IBC outside Cosmos, a lot of their focus is on that piece. And I think overall, the whole point of IBC is it lends itself as one of the most secure infrastructure products in terms of moving assets or information between chains. The security on IBC, when implemented properly, I should note, but the security on IBC hinges extremely heavily on the security of the underlying chain. So you have something like Ethereum or Solana or Cosmos where you've got tons of people staking, these chains are super secure. It should really just be dependent on whether consensus is safe on those chains in terms of your asset safety or losing things in a bridging transaction.
Okay, so IBC essentially enables these chains to communicate. What would be the difference, I guess, between IBC and a bridge?
Yeah, so I mean, I think with bridging solutions, we see all kinds of different setups. They'll either hinge on some type of intermediary liquidity pool that things get sort of matched up and swapped across the chain, or there's some sort of multi-sig sitting in the middle saying, okay, everything passing through is okay. For IBC, sort of like I just mentioned, it's all dependent on the chain, the two chains itself that it's connected to. So you're not really worrying about any type of third-party intermediary when you're moving assets. It's really just, do you trust the two chains that are being connected by this infrastructure?
Okay, so it allows two chains to pass, is it messaging and assets or just messaging?
Yeah, so I guess like a little more like techie answer is just data packets between chains. Like this can take the form of assets or it could be order instructions. I think we'll probably see some crazier stuff in the future, but those are two sort of mainstays.
And how long typically, like say if I want to use IBC to move an asset from Cosmos to Osmosis, how long typically does that take?
Yeah, so a lot of it just depends on verifying the information on both sides of the chain. So it's a little bit chain dependent. Something between Ethereum to Cosmos is going to be a little bit slower than Cosmos to Cosmos, I think is probably the best example. So I think like in the fastest, you're probably going to see stuff move in 30 seconds. I think in the longest, we start to reach things like maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Relatively quick, but not super fast, just depending on where you're going from it too.
So the value prop, I guess, would be for these chains, say like Arbitrum, Optimism, or Solana, et cetera, would be, hey, plug into, you get to plug into IBC, and this is going to enable you to access all this entire new ecosystem of users and value, liquidity, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one angle is maybe the cross-pollination of assets. So it's like you've carved yourself out as a Solana native or an Ethereum native, and you don't really move from that chain. It's like, well, here's a way that you can go ahead and access things like maybe I want to buy WIF from Cosmos and things like that. I guess if you think in like the much broader scheme of things, it's probably a lot less likely that new users or users that are unfamiliar to crypto go ahead and start bridging stuff and it's jumping around different like chains and things like that. I think most people find themselves on Ethereum or probably Solana at this point first. So now it's kind of like, well, you can reach these additional users that might not be hanging out on CT all day or looking at this stuff like crazy that maybe you wouldn't get otherwise.
What do you imagine, I guess, maybe 2 years down the line? Like you got Picasso plugged into Arbitrum, Optimism, Solana. What sort of vision are you guys envisioning with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a narrative that's started to catch a little bit more attention lately, or at least I'm seeing it more. But I think you just want to think in this whole world of chain abstraction, right? And I guess like a lot of people draw parallels to how the internet used to work to how it works today, where you just sort of pop and open a browser and you don't care about anything going on under the hood. I think we want an extremely similar experience in the crypto world. So you have ETH, Solana, and Cosmos. You don't have to worry about where all of those things are. You want to interact cross-chain. You don't have to worry about navigating to independent pages. It's sort of just this world where you can access all of this stuff, but you really don't have to get super deep in the weeds, sort of like we have it today.
Okay, so maybe like a fair assessment of what Picasso's vision is, you know, there's a lot of different ways maybe that interoperability could be solved that the market's looking at right now. One of those ways could be IBC, and IBC works really well within the Cosmos ecosystem. And you're saying, hey, if IBC is the future, if this is how all these chains are going to communicate in the future, we're going to be the kind of middleware that brings IBC to all these non-Cosmos chains to really enable that. And so if that's how things work out and IBC becomes this like cross-chain standard, we're going to be the ones positioning that so that chains like Ethereum, Arbitrum, Solana, BNB chain, like all et cetera, can all interoperate with IBC.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Maybe go into detail a little bit more about the restaking on Picasso and what you're doing there.
Yeah, totally. So just to backtrack a little bit, we need to get state proofs or consensus proofs from each chain when we move assets in between those two. It's a little more complex to do this on Solana, so we need some type of verifier network to say everything that's coming from and going to is okay. The way this works is similar to the way that validators work on Solana. So you go ahead and stake your Solana, and this commits some level of economic security to doing any malicious action on the chain. Similarly, on restaking, you would go ahead and take assets that you've already staked to Solana, for example. So maybe you have liquid staking derivatives like GTOSOL or MSOL, BlazeSol is another big one, and you can go ahead and reuse those assets. So you're basically recommitting their underlying economic value to securing this independent validator network. And for us, like the first example of using it this way would be Solana to IBC. In the future, I think we'll generalize this. So you might see something a little more similar to EigenLayer where rollups or decentralized sequencers could plug into this thing. The main point is the restaking layer just provides this extra security layer that can be plugged into in a somewhat modular fashion. As far as what we're doing with it, I mean, we've been doing a little bit of a team competition right now called Mantis Games. So we have a collection, I think mostly traded on Tensor right now for an NFT. The NFTs let you go ahead and make a like team over on our landing page, and then users can join up and compete for who has the most assets staked. We've got a bunch of rewards associated with that and whatnot. But this is sort of like the preliminary innings to actually launching Sol IBC.
And is that mostly focused around Solana, like restaking with Solana, or is that something that you're like maybe a blueprint that you just do with multiple different assets, liquid assets?
Yeah, so I think ideally, again, in the same way that we're saying you could interact with anything connected via IBC, we'd like to be able to sort of broaden this restaking initiative out. So I guess like a really crude way of thinking about it is every chain we're connected to IBC, we can spin up these restaking layers that all communicate with one another through our main Cosmos chain, and sort of provide this cross-chain restaking layer, so to speak. I think this is a bit far out in the future still, but I mean, to answer your question, yes, like Solana is the base case, and now it's sort of like, well, can we do this across everything?
So anything like you could go to Osmosis and be like, okay, we're going to restake Osmo, or we're going to or use Atom, and you can restake Atom.
Yeah, exactly. Basically anywhere where liquid staking derivatives exist would be the main targets right now. And like the Cosmos ecosystem is huge for that. Obviously, Ethereum's been huge for that. I think we'll see liquid staking derivatives from most proof of stake chains at this point, but those are probably like the big dogs at the moment.
And how does that differ from, you kind of went into detail on it, but how does your guys' version or the way you're using restaking differ from something like EigenLayer?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar in that sense. I mean, in the same vein, like our restaking layer and EigenLayer's restaking layer basically just provide this additional modular security for other platforms to tap into. I think for us right now, the focus is just a little bit more broad on this cross-chain type thing. And I think EigenLayer is obviously pretty segmented within the Ethereum ecosystem at the moment. So I don't know, maybe that'll change in the future, but I think probably the main differentiator is sort of just cross-chain versus not right now.
Okay, and the same concept, like again, you kind of went into detail, but I'll take my liquid stake Solana, right? And then I deposit it somehow onto Picasso or however you guys have it built. And then now other people can come essentially rent that security, and then maybe I don't know what Solana makes I don't know what their yield is, but say it's like 3% or whatever. I'm making 3% from Solana, and then whoever comes and rents, they might pay 1% for, X token that's running security through Liquid Stake Solana, and then 2% from other token. It would work kind of like that same way.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in the case of the Solana IBC, like validator set, users that restake there would be getting an additional split of whatever bridging revenue comes across it. So I think these will be lined up sort of differently depending on what plugs in and what the actual function of whatever it is plugs in. But in terms of like the bridge side, yeah, that would be flowing. Hopefully a few extra percent on the APY to sort of double up there.
Okay, so you're saying the first user, so with Eigenlayer, they have AVSs. Essentially, you guys would be the first AVS that's actually using the restaking. And then that's why you're building it. And if anyone else wants to come use it too, that's cool. But that actually wasn't the original intent of why you built it.
Yeah, I think the whole cross-chain restaking was sort of spawned from the necessity for us to create this AVS type format ourselves. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Why did you guys choose to build on Polkadot?
I mean, at the time, I think it was literally just a symptom of the times. I think a lot of the perspective was that Polkadot would lay this like excellent ecosystem for a lot of cross-chain stuff, mainly centered around the idea you have this app chain type layout, sort of similar to Cosmos, but instead of each chain relying on their own security, you just rely on the Polkadot relay chain. And I think now the project's become a little bit more agnostic to where we actually live, right? So we maintain a Cosmos chain at the moment as well, which is sort of become more of the hub for this whole thing.
Okay.
But realistically, yeah, at the moment, the home base is Polkadot and Kusama. It shouldn't really have any bearing on the way that the platform operates, but yeah, that's where we're located.
And I'm just curious because I literally never hear anything about Polkadot. I hear stuff about Cosmos, I hear stuff about Solana, Ethereum, everything else, but I never hear anything about Polkadot. What is Polkadot doing these days? Like, what are they up to?
I mean, that's a good question. I think with Polkadot, like if we just zoom out a little bit, like more broadly, they had this initial wave of projects, and the hope was like there would be this whole DeFi summer, so to speak, that happened there. And I think we just didn't really see it take off. And I think probably the main reason for that is just the lack of like user-friendly infrastructure. There's a pretty good wallet that exists called Talisman, but outside of that, even interacting with the stuff, you go to a site called Polkadot.js, and I think even for experienced users, I mean myself included, you just get lost in this thing. And I think it was just a whole ecosystem that became super hard for people to interact with. Like Arbitrum pops up and it's like, cool, let me hit this bridge and move some ETH over, and it's all the same in MetaMask. Polkadot, it's just like a whole song and dance for everything that you're doing over there. So I think that's something that's probably held them back a little bit in terms of just onboarding new people.
Yeah, that's a good point. The UI and UX on Polkadot is insanely difficult. I think I still have a 1 ETH like lock somewhere on Polkadot. I can't even figure out how to get it out. It was like I sent it over, but then like Ledger didn't support the app, so I couldn't withdraw it. It's confusing, but I check on it like every 6 months to see if I can get it out. Still can't, but one of these days probably we'll be able to get it out. Cool. So I really quickly just want to summarize what you've said so far, just to make it really easy to understand. So Picasso is a cross-chain protocol that brings IBC to all these various chains that are non-IBC enabled. And for anyone who doesn't understand, Cosmos, within their ecosystem, all these chains that build have the option to be IBC enabled, which allows like seamless cross-chain, both kind of data packets as you described it. So it's messaging, sending assets over. It's a really cool concept, but it's stuck in Cosmos. And you guys are saying, hey, we're gonna bring this to everywhere. We're bringing it to Polkadot, bring it to Ethereum, bring it to Solana, we're bringing it to Arbitrum, bring it to everywhere. And as a part of that, and as part of the way to build the actual infrastructure for that, you guys kind of figured out that it was useful to have restaking, building your own sort of AVS using some of these native assets. And so you're starting with Solana and you're saying, hey, we're going to take Solana, or Liquid Stake Solana, we're going to restake that to do some sort of bridging thing within Picasso. And then, but that opens the door for other assets to be restaked as well. And that's kind of the big overall vision of Picasso is cross-chain interoperability using IBC. Is that a solid summary?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that was great.
Okay, cool. What would you say the end game is for Picasso? Like, imagine 5 years, 10 years in the future.
Yeah, I mean, not to be a broken record, but I think it's exactly that. It's IBC everywhere. I mean, I think Ethereum and Solana sort of set the groundwork for most of the core infrastructure right now. Like other large ones from here would probably be your main layer twos or rollups. Will probably end up connecting to things like BSC and Tron because they become a little bit easier after the work we did on Ethereum. But realistically, the goal is to get IBC connections hooked up all over and sort of reach this overarching end game of just abstracting away the cross-chain experience for the end user.
Seems like this should have been something that like Cosmos Hub did. Like that would make so much sense because there's not a lot of use for it, but like they've talked about the shared security model similar to restaking. Actually, they talked about that before restaking was ever a thing. Bringing IBC to all these chains would make a lot of sense for the Cosmos Hub, but they just haven't really done much.
Yeah. I mean, like kind of like you're saying, interchain security, where somebody borrows security from the Cosmos Hub, hasn't really taken off massively. Like there's another concept over there, mesh security, and I might botch this a little bit. I'm sorry, but it's like essentially using each other's assets. So it's kind of an extension of ICS. But yeah, I haven't really seen it take off to the extent I think most would like yet, but it's obviously a possibility over there.
I feel like the Cosmos ecosystem has like some of the smartest people in the entire crypto space, and they always get it right. Their whole idea of like app chain thesis, having like this internet of chains, all of that was like well ahead of its time, has proven like almost everyone has adopted that same concept. Even proof of stake, I think, originally came from Cosmos. So they're crushing it, but it's just sad to see that like, the Atom token can't figure out a way to get any sort of value accrual. It has never really, taken off. Let's dive into the PICA token. What's that used for, and how does that fit into the ecosystem?
Yeah. So on the security side of things, PICA can be staked to secure our Cosmos chain. Right now, it can also be used in collator staking. This is similar to validators over on the Polkadot network. And users that stake right now get revenue share from assets that are moved across the bridge. So PICA stakers right now receive, I believe it's 20% of the revenue share. There's also some additional rewards on Cosmos for validating. Most chains have inflation over there right now. We don't have inflation built into the token. I think the vision or the goal is that bridging fees actually end up taking over what users might earn in rewards from typical just inflation validating over there. And then with the restaking layer, that'll kind of be a double whammy for PICA stakers. So sort of in the same way that restakers would get a cut of the bridging fee there, another portion of that goes to the PICA token as well. So probably in the future, if we're lucky enough to get a bunch of AVSs onboarding here, PICA would be earning revenue from all of those, and then bridging fees as well, and then obviously used for security on the main chain. So that's sort of the quick and easy.
No, that's good. I feel like when I was looking around, I don't remember where I saw it, but I saw something called the layer token. How does that relate to PICA, or how does that differ?
Yeah, so like I was saying before, how we sort of spawned into, I think, two separate pieces here with the Polkadot side, so Kusama and Polkadot. We have the layer token. It will be renamed to Mantis, and that's essentially the application layer I was talking about sitting on top of this stuff. So it should be thought of as an intent-based execution engine. So intents are being able to actually type out what you want to do. Like, hey, I want to swap, I want to stake. This is sent out through the protocol. It comes back to Picasso, and things are routed cross-chain that way. But the layer side, renamed to Mantis, is essentially just this unified UI, allowing you to interact with everything from the infrastructure side.
Huh. So the general concept is underlying foundation Picasso. The application layer is composable using the layer token, and it's going to be intent-based. So it's sort of like it's how you do all your cross-chain things through IBC, basically.
Correct. Yep.
What are you most excited about with Picasso over the next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, like a huge achievement should be, I guess, sooner than a year away. But I think Ethereum IBC, there's been a ton of teams working on that. So it'd be awesome to get that out into production. And I think we haven't really seen as much activity as we could have just being hooked up to Cosmos and Polkadot and Kusama at this point. So it'll be interesting once the floodgates sort of open with Solana and Ethereum. and then we get composable out on top to see like how useful this actually is in the wild. So yeah, sort of like I mentioned before, I feel like we've been on live testnet for a while, so it'll be cool to just have everything sort of hooked up, or at least some of our main goals sort of accomplished there.
Do you guys have deadlines or timelines for when some of those things go live?
Very roughly, yeah. I think so. Solana and Ethereum have been right at the edge for a bit now. I think in the next 2 weeks, I don't want to say definitely, but we'll most likely have Solana IBC. And I think Ethereum IBC will either follow right in line or after, and that'll sort of cap Picasso for the time being a little bit. And then I think second half, maybe even a little bit of Q2 this year, the focus really starts to come to this application layer on top and just making this the most seamless experience to actually use.
What about the restaking? Do you know when that goes live?
So right now you can go ahead and restake. We have the little restaking competition that we opened up, and this is sort of just like reserving assets for when Sol IBC goes live. So once Sol IBC is live, that'll be the first AVS, like you said. That'll be like true Solana restaking in the wild. And then we'll be looking to just onboard partners within that ecosystem as we can, as far as additional AVSs go. So everything should sort of be in line with the bridge launching there.
What other projects in the space get you excited right now? It doesn't have to do anything with Picasso. Just looking around, I'm always asking people like, what's getting you excited? It could be a cool project that you're like, this is amazing. Or it could be just like something you feel like doesn't get a lot of attention.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think about some of my favorites right now. It's been around for a bit, but Thorchain, is like cross-chain native swaps. That was one that I've been following for a really long time. I ran some validators there and stuff for a while too. So I think that's just an interesting one in terms of like how much use will it continue to get. I hope a lot. I think a lot. It's been doing really well. So that I have an eye on. I think some of the newer stuff is really interesting. Like I'm sure everybody talks about Celestia. But I think starting to see some projects that actually build being hooked up to Celestia should be interesting. I don't think we've seen a whole ton of that yet, but it's definitely coming. And then I don't know, I guess like project I really like, everyone's familiar now with liquid stake tokens, but Stride over in the Cosmos ecosystem is basically trying to become the black hole for every asset in Cosmos. And that team's super smart, so it's been fun to like watch them do well and start to take off. But I think that's probably like a few different areas that I'm excited about, or at least watching right now.
Awesome. Well, as always, none of this has been investment advice. None of this was just telling you to buy any of these things. You should always do your own research. And if people want to kind of stay up to date with Picasso, they want to stay up to date with everything you guys are doing, where would be the best place to do that?
Yeah, I think the typical suspects in the space, Twitter, we're Picasso Network over there. We have a Discord you could join as well. Our main website with all the social links is composable.finance, so you can find your way safely to everything there.